Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode of Sonar Fishing, let's talk about jig heads. And I'm not talking about like shaky heads or Ned rigs, those standalone jig head designs that you use with like worms or something like that. I'm talking about like the traditional skirted jig. This right here, is a classic. It's a bait that has caught a lot of fish, and there's a lot of different head designs on jigs like this. So I just kind of wanted to break down, my process for choosing a jig head or a jig head design. And it's a little bit different than a lot of people, because I know a lot of people that have 100 different designs in their box. They have a bait that does a head design that does extremely well in one situation, and they have another that works in a totally different situation. I've got like 4 or 5 different jig head designs that I use on a regular basis that are very versatile. In my opinion, and that's the way I like to fish. I like to keep things simple and really not like confuse myself and waste a bunch of time figuring out like which exact jig to use on the water, and that goes with a lot of different categories of baits. I find baits and designs that I like, that I have confidence in, and I fish them. So that's what I'm going to kind of share with you guys today. But I will mention, now that I've said that, there are jig heads that work in certain situations, that work well in certain situations. So that's why I want to break these down for you. All right, so the first jig head design, I've already showed you the jig, that I want to show you is an Arky style jig head shape. Okay, this right here is what a lot of people consider an Arky style jig head shape. This is the cross eyes flipping jig from Z-Man. Aptly named. It's got some cross eyes on there, but this is a very classic shape. Okay, and this shape right here, it's narrow from top to bottom. Okay, so it's very slender top to bottom, but it's got kind of a wideness to it. It almost has like a football shaped head on it. Some have a little bit more of a football shaped head like this one right here, and some have a little bit more rounded edges to make it a little bit more streamlined. This is a great jig right here for a lot of different situations. So as a casting jig, a pitching jig, and a flipping jig, this is a really, really good choice, this jig head shape. Okay, and the reason for that is number one, you can skip this jig very well because of the flat bottom and the wide surface area on the head. Okay, that's a really important part of this. It also does very well at coming through hard cover, so things like brush piles, flooded timber, dock posts, anything like that, any type of wood cover, flooded bushes is a really good example, laydowns. All that stuff is going to be perfect for throwing an Arky style jig head design because it comes through that cover very well. But what it does do also is it will kind of hang temporarily on the cover and kind of roll over the cover as you're fishing it. So, and that has a lot to do with the overall angle of this line tie. Line tie has a lot to do with jig head designs. And let's focus there. There we go. And right there, you can see how it's kind of I'm not sure exactly which degree, but it's kind of got a slight degree up. All right, and so that allows this to really, if you had it coming straight off the nose, it would have to go like this, and then the line tie would just get wedged right there in the wood. But this, because it's positioned like that, it kind of hits it and then rolls over it and pivots perfectly over that cover. So that's the kind of like angle that I really like to see on a jig head like this for flipping, pitching, skipping, and that sort of thing. So Arky style, really good for those situations where you're presenting a jig to heavier cover but harder cover, so rock and wood. That's where I like to throw it. And you can't throw it around vegetation. It's not as streamlined as I'd like for vegetation, and honestly, nowadays I just end up using like a tungsten worm weight and a punch skirt, and some type of elastic plastic for you know, like my jig presentations in grass, you know, if you want to call it that. You know, when I'm fishing hardcover, that's when I like to reach for an Arky style jig head. All right, and so the next jig head that I also fish around heavier cover is a more finesse jig head design. All right, this is a very similar, the line tie is very similar to the Arky style head. I'm not sure what I would call this one. This one's almost like a bullet style head. It's got that bullet style design to it, but it has that same exact angle that we were talking about, where it allows this bait to hit the cover and pivot over perfectly without snagging. And it also creates this cool little darting action under the water when you're working it. This right here is the Power Finesse flippin' jig from Z-Man. This is a really good one for the same type of situations, flipping brush, flipping dock posts, any type of hard cover, and just, you know, when you want a smaller presentation. You don't want like that big bulky traditional flipping jig like the Arky style head. You just want something a little bit smaller. Now, this isn't exactly the style design that this is kind of a unique head design compared to a lot of the other finesse jigs out there, but this one is designed more for a flip-in presentation. So still heavier line, you've got a good heavy hook on it. So it's still designed for like 15 to 20 pound test fluorocarbon or monofilament or whatever you like to use. I like to use fluorocarbon, but it's still, you can still use heavier line. I don't know, going up to the 20 pound test kind of to me is pushing it, but it is a heavy enough hook to be able to handle that. You just got to be very careful with it. But this is a head design that I think does extremely well for those situations where you want a more finessey, smaller presentation, but the same type of cover that you would be fishing the Arky. So that's a really good one. And in the finesse jig category, because I don't consider that really a finesse jig, I consider it a finesse flipping jig. But if you're going to fish like more you know, rocky banks and lighter line, and you want a jig that maybe has like kind of that like that lion's mane skirt, or you know, just those traditional you know, finesse jigs that you see coming from the Ozarks back in the day, this is kind of what you're looking at right here, is a ball style head. All right, so you can see that the angle of the tie is actually coming off at a greater angle on this, and it's got a ball head style, so it's just round all around, and it's made to kind of stand up on the paws. This one right here doesn't have the skirt, obviously. I kind of keep some of these without skirts just so I can mix and match the skirts on the fly. But this is a really good one, not for like heavy cover, but for moderate cover and primarily rock cover. So like if you're fishing like a bluff bank or something like this one right here does extremely well around rock, but is going to snag more if you're throwing it in brush. It's just not as streamlined. The line tie is not in the position where it's as good. See, if it comes in contact with like a limb or something, it takes a lot of pressure for it to want to pivot over that limb. So it's not quite as good. You could still fish it around like brush or something like that, but it's not as good as like that more you know, flippin' style head on this finesse jig. So the next one that I want to talk about, and there's only two left that I really have in my tackle boxes. This one right here is a very special jig head to me because I love fishing it, especially later in the year, you know, during the post-spawn and summer months. This right here is a football jig, okay? So the characteristics of a football jig are pretty obvious. You got a football shaped head, and you've got a line tie that's pretty aggressive. It's coming off the head at almost a 90-degree angle, but not quite. And so this jig right here is very, very good for grinding over rock. So like if you're dragging it over shell beds or gravel or chunk rock or something like that, it's good because it comes in contact with rock and kind of it'll kind of rock in place before it pops over and you know, it makes contact with the next rock. So it has intentionally it has a little bit of a pivot, and because of that shape of that head, it wants to rock with the bait, whatever trailer you're using, sticking straight up. So it kind of rocks and puts that trailer into a defensive crawfish you know, position. And that's why a football jig is so good. It's just really good for any type of rock cover. It's not my choice for any type of wood cover, but when you're faced with rock that's not like big giant boulders, this is a really good one. When you're dealing with you know, boulders or riprap or something like this, it can be a little bit difficult to fish a football jig. And the reason for that is because this wide head design might wedge in the riprap or chunk rock a little bit more. But for smaller rock and fishing like things like ledges and, you know, offshore structure that isn't real aggressive, sharp, you know, craggly rock, this is a really awesome jig head design that you definitely want to throw in those situations. But I love throwing the football jig, man. I have made a lot of money on it. I love fishing it on like points, you know, main lake and secondary points during the pre-spawn, ledges during the summer months. You can cover a lot of water, and it's also like a Carolina rig. You can really maintain bottom contact and feel your way around the bottom and the structure and find those little sweet spots that have, you know, rocky transitions or something like that. Usually I'm using anywhere from a 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce football jig. This is the Z-Man cross-size football jig. I love this football jig. And so I use usually, like, you know, if it's 15 foot or less, the 1/2 ounce version is good. But anything past that, 3/4 ounce is like my all-time favorite football jig, just because I love making contact with the bottom, maintaining that contact, and feeling my way around the bottom. And so football jig, good for covering water, rocky, hard bottom areas. That's what I like to use it on. All right, and so the final jig that I have in my tackle box is very, very different. So we all know how versatile a jig is. You can use it in a lot of different cover. You can use it in a lot of different ways. You can fish it differently. And I think the most dramatic difference between all these different jig heads, it has got to be in the swimming, you know, the swimming jig head design. So this right here, you can see it's a much more slender, thin, streamlined, more you know, just pointy design to it. All right, it's kind of like an arrowhead design. This is called the snakehead swim jig from Z-Man, and it's just it's got the shape of a head, like a viper style head. And you can see the line tie comes straight off the nose. That's one thing that is very common with the swim jigs out there, and it's because that's the way that you're fishing. You're just reeling it back in, so you don't want that pivot point to be too high up on the nose there. You want it coming straight through the water column. So the swim jig is just for that, swimming around grass. Swimming around grass, swimming around docks. I said grass, but really any type of cover you can swim this swim jig around. And you usually put like some type of you know, like swimming tail trailer on it, like the minnows or the diesel minnows or something. I actually like to use the turbo fatties, cut it down to size and put that on it. Works really good. This is actually another swim jig right here. This is the Midwest Finesse swim jig from Z-Man. They just introduced it last year. There we go. And a lot smaller. You can see the big difference in size right there. It's hard to tell because I've got a trailer on it, but there is a huge difference in size, especially the hook. But swim jig design, again, you're just casting these things out, reeling them back, fishing them around cover, in cover, and they are just made to cover a lot of water and fish in the middle of the water column or close to the surface or something like that. So anyways, guys, those are the jig designs, the basic jig designs that you're going to be finding out there on the market. Now, every jig is going to be a little bit different. there's probably 100 different Arky style jig head designs, just for example. And so you find the one that you like that kind of fits your style of fishing and what you feel like is, you know, kind of fits the fishing situation the best, and go after it. Keep it simple. Go out there and just use these principles that I've just kind of broken down for you as far as the jig head design. Use them in those general situations and you're gonna have success. So hopefully this helped you kind of navigate through the plethora of jig head designs out there. If you guys have any questions, drop a comment below. And if there are any of these on 44tackle.com, I'm gonna put the affiliate link in the bio below, the description below, and you can use that to get 10% off of your order and also support the channel. So thank you guys for using those links. All right, thank you for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm gonna see you out on the water. Take care.